Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Lots to talk about when it comes to the transfer window today, because it's that kind of time when, especially with the new manager now in place, where the word starts going out there among agents, among people around players, within the club, a little bit more of an idea of what they want, I guess, and what the new manager wants, and what they're trying to aim towards by the end of this transfer window. And that's great for journalists like myself because, people all start to talk amongst each other and you start being able to piece together what's hopefully to come. Doesn't always happen at the end. We've certainly seen that. The best laid plans, especially for Tottenham Hotspur, don't always end up being the end result. But we've got a bit more of a sense now of what Spurs are going to try and do in this transfer window, and that's what's going to be pretty much the subject of this video. So, start off, we know what the priority is. There's no getting away from it. It is that defence. That includes the goalkeeper, the back line, a very different back line this season because it's going to be a back four. But look, that defence was leakier than an old rusty pipe. We know it was. It was 63 goals conceded in the Premier League last season, which is absolutely ridiculous. It was worse than all but 5 other teams who were in and around the bottom of the Premier League. That is atrocious, and it should not be. How pretty much any Premier League side with any aspiration should be. Horrendous, absolutely horrendous. And obviously we know that Postecoglou sides, they defend high up the pitch. Their aggressive, relentless pressing at the top end of the pitch is what tries to win the ball back. But they also need a back line that can be trusted, I guess, when the opposition do play around or even sometimes over that relentless pressing. They need to be able to anticipate for that. Because the thing is, you look at the Spurs attack, and essentially they scored 70 goals, which weirdly is, I think, only 4 Premier League teams scored more last season. But let's be honest, we've got to add the massive caveat, excuse, reason that is Harry Kane. 30 of those 70 Premier League goals came from one man, which is just, we can't get going about Harry Kane because he's just remarkable. So yes, we know the focus is going to be mainly on the defence rather than the attack, but obviously, you'll be well aware, because of the name James Maddison floating around, that Spurs are also looking at a midfielder and a young winger. But we will look at that as this video goes on. We need to start at the back end of the pitch. Let's start with the man between the sticks, because we know that for the first time in 11 years that Hugo Lloris is going to have to be replaced. It's mad. Honestly, I interviewed Michael Dawson the other day at the kit launch, and I was asking about Hugo, and he said, "Oh yeah, because obviously I played in front of Hugo. I was his captain," and I completely forgot that it was so long ago that Michael Dawson was playing in front of Hugo Lloris, which is just mad. 11 years Spurs haven't had to splash out on a new goalkeeper. They haven't had to spend big money in that position, so it's a little bit awkward to kind of, when you know what we're going to talk about, and obviously they are looking for the right price. I guess any club doesn't want to be kind of stitched up in a way over a transfer value, but still, Spurs have saved a lot of money through Hugo Lloris over the years. If you have been living under a rock and didn't know this, Hugo Lloris, of course, publicly has made it clear that he wants a new challenge. He has said that he would like, if possible, to head off. Where that is, we don't know. Everyone seems to be going to the Saudi League right now, or I've always wondered whether Lloris might go to the MLS because of his wife. Obviously has a very successful, I think it's a children's clothing brand, which I think is quite big in America with various Hollywood stars over there. So I always wondered if he'd go to the MLS, but he's also wanted to go back to France at some point, and specifically Nice, his hometown club. So I don't know where he'll end up. We'll find that out in the coming weeks. I don't imagine there's any issue with Spurs letting him go as long as they get a replacement. That seems to be my understanding. So yeah, we are now at a strange phase where we have to find... Because if you remember, I said back in December last year that the plan for this summer was to bring in the successor, the long-term successor to Lloris. Obviously, now Lloris has made it clear that he wants to move on. That search now becomes for very much an immediate heir for him. So yeah, the obvious name, who's very high among the candidates, is David Raya, or I guess he keeps telling me it's Raya, which I don't think I'm ever going to get my brain around because I constantly called him Raya. So I'm going to refer to him as Raya now. And if you all want to tell me in the comments it's the wrong way to pronounce it, I will absolutely try to change it for the next video and still probably completely fail to remember that. He's 27-year-old. If you're not aware of the season he's had at Brentford, it's been a very good season. Ever present pretty much for them between the sticks. Good shot stopper. Got good ability with his feet. What I would say is I've seen certain instances where he's been pressed and under pressure. He can make a few mistakes, but I guess that applies to a lot of goalkeepers. But certainly he's very good at picking out players with his passing. So yeah, he does fit the archetype for a Postecoglou goalkeeper. And he also is homegrown because he came to Blackburn when he was 16 years old. So he actually qualifies as a homegrown player from what I understand. Unless there's been some little break in that, which I couldn't find, I think he qualifies as a homegrown player. So if you're not aware of what you need to be a Postecoglou goalkeeper, essentially you need to get the ball rolling very quickly back into play. His motto is, we never stop, they're relentless. The ball is not meant to be out of play for very long in a Postecoglou team. It wants to be constantly recycled up the pitch with little hesitation and building up possession from the back. You'll very rarely see his goalkeepers hoof the ball long. He does not like that. And like I say, while Raya can still improve some aspects of his distribution under pressure, he is still a goalkeeper that hasn't reached his prime, and that's a good thing for Spurs because, they'll get his best years if they can get him through the door. His ability to play in a high line as well, to be able to kind of sweep up behind the defence when the defence, sometimes the centre-backs will step into the midfield, sometimes the inverted fullbacks will come inside as well. The ability to work in that, and the whole aim of a Postecoglou team is to squeeze the space the opposition have to work in. So you have to be a goalkeeper. Funnily enough, that's what Lloris was very good at, especially in his younger years, was playing that super keeper role. But we have to be honest, with his feet, he just, especially under pressure, would make mistakes, unfortunately, with his feet. That wasn't his most successful area of his game. That's probably the way to put it. But Raya, the problem with Raya right now is, while he appears to be keen on a move to Spurs, and there doesn't seem to be any issue in terms of personal terms, and he does only have 12 months left on his contract at Brentford, the issue appears to be what Brentford are asking for him, which appears to be around the £40 million range, which it's very difficult because of all teams, Tottenham, probably not the best place to be unhappy about someone putting a high valuation on a player with only 12 months left, because that's exactly what they're doing with Harry Kane. It's slightly hypocritical, but what I would say is I get the impression that Spurs are looking more towards the fee they paid for Bissouma, who also had 12 months left on his contract. They got him for about £25 million as the initial fee. You could argue, and Brentford might argue that, well, Bissouma wasn't homegrown. That's another element to it. But Bissouma was, and hopefully still will be, one of the best Premier League midfielders around. So, personally, this is just me, and Brentford can tell me absolutely to do one because I have no say in this whatsoever. But I would have thought 25 to 30 was a more realistic valuation. 40 million seems a lot for a goalkeeper with 12 months left on his contract, and they've already signed his replacement as well. Mark Flecken's come in as well. Tom Allnutt from The Times managed to get an interview with Raya out on international duty. Tom speaks fluent Spanish, and he got a really good... Not that Raya doesn't speak English as well. I don't actually know. I'm saying that. I don't actually know whether they did the interview in Spanish or English, but I don't know. I should have asked Tom that. I didn't even think about that. But the quotes are more important than me waffling about the language it was in. Raya said, "I know there are rumours about me leaving. There are some options for me to go, but obviously Brentford are asking for a lot of money. That could make clubs not want to buy me. It could make them look somewhere else. But if that's the value they give me, then it's up to them. I have a year left on my contract, and until then, I'm a Brentford player. There's nothing I can do. I have ambitions to make the next step in my career. I want to try to win titles and to compete in Europe in the next couple of years. I'm 27 now, and I feel like I'm at the point in my career where I want to make that step up. There are options out there, but it's not just my ambitions. The club also needs to let me go. It was interesting, some of those words. Try to win titles. Not quite yet at Spurs, although a lot of foreign players and managers do refer to just silverware as titles. Conte would do that all the time. And you notice the quite clever wording of, I want to play, where is it? I want to play in Europe in the next couple of years. So yes, not next year for Spurs, but maybe the one after. Spurs are not the only club interested in Raya. Man United also have an interest in him apparently as well. Obviously, the David De Gea situation seems to be a one that not everyone's entirely sure what's going to happen next, but it does seem like De Gea, I think, Ten Hag has come out publicly and said that they would like to bring in another goalkeeper to challenge him. So they've looked at Raya. I think they've also looked at Jordan Pickford, who Spurs, again, is another one that they've looked at as well over the years. Spurs also looked at homegrown ones. They've looked at Dean Henderson, Robert Sanchez at Brighton as well, who I think is also, he is homegrown. That's why I've included him in that list. Obviously, Pickford, for example, only signed a 4-year contract, I think it was just 4 months ago. So, not cheap at all. But Spurs do have alternatives. If for some reason Brentford just stick to that price and Spurs don't want to go that high, they do have alternatives. You might remember I reported back in December that Spurs really like the Valencia goalkeeper. He's only 22. I'm going to murder the pronunciation of his name, as I probably did back in December. Georgi Mamadashvili. Well, that might be right. That actually might be okay. They kind of saw him as much younger, but a potentially long-term successor for Lloris. He signed a contract last September, I think, until 2027. So, but he has been quite heavily linked with leaving Valencia this summer. They also like Mike Magnin. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. 27-year-old Milan keeper who's obviously very good. But what I would say about probably Mamadashvili and also definitely Magnin, they would cost a lot more than Raya would. So you kind of get to that point where you think, do you just bite the bullet and pay the money for Raya and get him through the door because you know he can kind of hit the ground running and he's what you want. So, yeah. We'll see what happens. My gut feeling is you would think that that's one that will eventually push in the right direction. But it all depends on Brentford. Brentford have every right, as Spurs are doing with Harry Kane, to stick to their asking price. But obviously, for a club like Brentford, you could maybe argue, can they put themselves in the risk of losing him for free next summer? I don't know. Whereas with Spurs, there is no replacement for Harry Kane. Whereas obviously Brentford have brought in their replacement as well in Flecken. So they're kind of set up, and then they could just put the money towards other stuff. So you'd hope that stance softens slightly in the weeks to come. But again, like they did with Conte last summer, you'd think for a new head coach in Postecoglou, you just want to get everything in place for him to hit the ground running in pre-season. Obviously, if Raya were to come in, he's been away with the international setup with Spain in the Nations League, although he didn't play. So whether that means that he'd be more willing to come back earlier in pre-season than take the extra time, because technically, yes, he was away in training, he wasn't relaxing and resting up. But you'd think any new players probably going to come in as early as they possibly can. But let's see. Again, I think it's all pretty much down to Brentford. People would quite rightly argue, well, it's down to Spurs, because Spurs could go in there, put in the bid that does the bid deal and get it done. But it's Spurs. It is Spurs. And they don't like to pay over the odds. And I must admit, as I've said, I kind of do feel that he is a little bit overpriced at the moment if you're going to say 40 million. By the way, if you're wondering why this video is a lot lighter and maybe a slightly different angle, it's because my youngest daughter, who was the one that actually suggested I do YouTube videos, all those a couple of years back when it wasn't really something that I'd thought about. For one of my Father's Day presents, bought me this kind of lighting thing that connects, because what I do is so basic. I've had many people in recent years be very kindly reach out with all these offers of, would you like us to put fancy graphics on it? Would you like us to edit it and make it look all like fancy? And I've always said, I'll be very honest, I'm fine. It is very much just me, a guy sitting on his sofa, chatting away about Spurs, just my raw stream of consciousness. I sit down, I record it, I upload it, and that is what you see. It's all one take. There's no me, you know it. You hear me fluffing around my words and things like that, and sometimes distracted by anything that's going on around me. But yeah, no, my daughter very kindly bought me this light thing that goes around the thing, which is specifically for video recording. I think it's one of those kind of selfie type things. I think it's actually for videos. So yeah, if it looks slightly different, actually in my mind makes me look really hot and sweaty, which I am. It probably shines out even better on this very hot day. But I don't know. Maybe it makes it look a little bit clearer. I have no real idea. But we'll see how it works. It's worth the testing. We shall see. So that's goalkeepers anyway. I digress. Back to goalkeepers. That's that really. We see who they go for now. We see, like I say, if you've identified Raya, you go for him, in my mind. But there are some good ones there. I like the idea of Mamadashvili as well. I think he's a very talented young keeper and only 22. There's another player there that you can have for the long term if he comes in and does everything Spurs are asking of him. So yeah, that's the goalkeepers. Moving on to centre-backs. We've got... Look, I've said this before, and this is the biggest thing when it comes to Spurs, is in the past 2 summer transfer windows, they have wanted to sign 2 centre-backs. And it is the same case this summer. But the big problem with Spurs is they have not been able to shift players out the door to make that happen. So it's, as I said right at the top of this video, it's all well and good having your best laid plans, but ultimately, if you haven't got the players out the door to create the space in the squad, you can't just stockpile these defenders. If you're wondering why I'm ever so slightly distracted, it was because Harry Kane just took a massive whack to the face in the England match, which is on in the background. Don't worry. I've had people tell me before when I had a match on once before, it's very unprofessional, you shouldn't do that. And I understand that, that's quite right. But it was England. I'm not going to be that fussed by an international match, but I just thought I'd have it on just in case. Ironically, I told myself just in case something bad did happen to Kane or something very good happened to Kane. And ironically, 17 minutes in or so, and he's just bashed his face, but he seems fine. It seems fine. So don't worry. The update you didn't need when you'll be well aware of this because you're watching it. But yeah, when it comes to centre-backs, this has been their biggest issue, and it's moving defenders out the door so that they could bring in 2 new centre-backs. I would say the expectation this time is that they should be able to get players out the door. It's quite interesting because we'll talk about this in a second, but I was looking at the players that could head out the door, and then I'd say, oh yeah, that one will probably go, that one will probably go, that one will probably go. And I looked at it, it's like, oh, I've got rid of almost all of the centre-backs. And it's like, it can't really do that. It's not really how football works. I know it, in Football Manager we do that, and FIFA and things like that, but actually in real football you don't normally get rid of your entire backline to start again. Some people might argue after that season you maybe should, but look, what I would say, again, going back to the Postecoglou system, you need defenders who are brave on the ball. They need to be able to do crisp, short, sharp passing. Under pressure as well. They need to be strong in duels, they need to be good in their marking, and they need to have the mobility to play in at times a high line. I wouldn't say they need to be lightning fast. I would say they just need to be able to have that anticipation and reading of the game which is required to deal with breaks and counter-attacks. And they also have to have the ability to step into the midfield when required and make up extra numbers to squeeze the opposition higher up the pitch. So what I understand, as I've said, that again, yes, it is again, they are looking for 2 centre-backs. One who can play in the left-sided role and one who can play in the right-sided role. This is the thing now, we're not looking at a back 3, we're just looking at 2 central defenders in the middle. depending on the options available in the market, from what I understand, there is the potential that they might try to bring in an experienced centre-back and one young up-and-coming centre-back as well. Kind of an experienced head to guide the defence and a younger one who can only get better and better, which is probably more the normal Spurs way of signing a defender again. But again, I cannot stress enough to keep coming back to this caveat that they need to get defenders out of the club first. And this is the thing, we always kind of, in the past, have not mocked, but always there's been this thing about Spurs not being able to pay the same wages as other clubs. But the irony is they do actually pay quite well, and that then has a knock-on effect in trying to get these players away to other clubs. Because a lot of clubs in Europe, especially on the continent, do not go anywhere near the wages that a Premier League team, let alone someone like Spurs, pay out. So if you're a player who's being kind of hawked around Europe, they're trying to get you away to anywhere, even on loan to somewhere, you're thinking, well, why would I give up my wages? Because you want me out of the club. And even on loan deals, I know there's a lot of loan deals Spurs do where they're having to make up a big hefty percentage of the salary. So getting them out the door permanently becomes even more difficult. One player I know has been open to a move in the recent windows is Davinson Sanchez. I think I've said this before. So he's wanted regular first team football. His contract's now approaching its last 12 months. So it does feels like a natural point, I think, for both parties to go their separate ways. But it's about finding someone who wants him. And the irony is he probably does have the pace to play in a Postecoglou defence, but maybe not, if we're going to be completely fair, the ability to pass under pressure. I think that would be exposed in the Postecoglou team. I think it would, unfortunately, because you do naturally have to quickly release the ball as the opposition are running at you, and that's just unfortunately something that Big Dav, for all of his qualities, and he does have them. Look, I won't say he's had the most wonderful season in the world, and I know there's fans that don't like him, and we've seen it in the stadium. It was such a kind of a rubbish moment for him when he kind of got booed and jeered, and then cheered when he went off. But I actually think there is a very good defender in there. He just needs to erase the mistakes. I do wonder if he's someone that will go elsewhere and maybe in a different league and will become a very good defender, just playing regular football. That's another thing for him. He kind of hasn't always had that rhythm of consistently playing. But look, I don't want to offer up excuses for people. People get very upset when I do that. So we'll see what happens with Davinson, but you would imagine that he will be one of the ones heading out the door this summer. Question marks still surround Eric Dyer, of course. Strange season for Dyer. Started well, but progressively got worse as it went on. He will now, no doubt, could use as an excuse that he had this groin injury that was only later revealed that he just got progressively worse and worse. The pain did, and he had to have a surgery just towards the end of the season. He's going to be fit and fine for pre-season. Again, nearing the last 12 months of his contract, 29 years old. It's one of those situations now where I think I don't want to use the expression do or die because that's a little bit heavy, but keep or sell, sign or sell, because ultimately you've either got to sell him this summer. It's the same with Sanchez, to be honest, because of this final 12 months. You've either got to sell him this summer or you've got to get him to sign a new deal or offer him a new deal, because I don't think Spurs would be particularly happy to let either of those two players leave on a free transfer. And you could argue, look, I know there'd be a lot of very upset fans if Eric Dyer signs a new contract. But I've got to be so careful of what I say, because then an aggregator sticks this out as a single sentence on its own without all of the context it's framed within. And I get people going, oh, he loves Dyer. Oh, he's such a whatever. Insert bad word here. But from a business point of view, if you're going to end up keeping Eric Dyer this summer, whether it be just not as a first team starter guaranteed, maybe more of a squad player, a rotation option, I think you do still have to offer him a contract, so that if you did want to then sell him next summer, you would get some value for him. And I do think there's clubs that would buy Eric Dyer. I don't think he's someone that, you would probably struggle to sell. I think there would be a few clubs in the Premier League that would buy him, and also abroad as well. So, and I know people hate when you talk about things from a business point of view, but I could see in that scenario why a contract would be given, because you're almost protecting the value of an asset. So yeah. Again, another player we'll have to see. But to have two players with 12 months left on their contract, you would think that if an offer comes in for them that's good enough, Spurs just accept. Unless Postecoglou decides that he wants one. I mean, yeah. With Dyer, there's elements of his ability on the ball that I can see that work in a Postecoglou system. There's elements of his passing that also don't. He likes his big diagonal passes, which are not really a feature of a Postecoglou system. But, yeah, pace-wise, high line, he's a funny one, Dyer. Sometimes his anticipation's really good. Sometimes it's absolutely horrendous. But then, he might argue without the injury, maybe he's a better player. He had a decent season, the one before last, which people kind of slightly brushed under the carpet, but he did have a good season, the one before last. I remember looking back at my season player ratings, and overall he'd had a decent campaign. But yeah, you can't say the same for last year. Last season's not been good at all. But yeah, I don't want to stick around on Eric Dyer too much because people get very angry about him. I still don't think that even if he stays, he would be a guaranteed starter next season. I think we saw towards the end of the season, even Ryan Mason, who supposedly plays his mates. You know my thoughts on that because we've said that before. But, he dropped Eric Dyer, and then obviously Eric Dyer ended up needing the surgery anyway. It almost seemed like good timing for it to happen. Who else? Joe Rodon. Joe Rodon, another one. You'd imagine Postecoglou want to have a little look at him, but you'd imagine he'll move on just purely for regular football. Because even if he stays at Spurs, he's unlikely to be, you'd think, a guaranteed starter each week. Obviously, he had the loan spell at Rennes. I think from what I understand, there's interest in him from other Premier League clubs and some clubs in France as well. So yeah, keep an eye on Rodon. Again, I think he's one that Spurs could get money for. So he then becomes a little bit of an asset in that sense. Who else we got? Japhet Tanganga. Japhet Tanganga needs regular minutes. It's just, he's wasted away at Spurs. I mean, he's had his injury issues, which have not helped. But ultimately, he and Rodon have both got 2 years left on their deal. It's an awkward one. For me, as I've just said to you earlier about the players that could leave, I mean, if those four all leave, you're left with only Cristian Romero. You can't just have one centre-back left out of the 5 you originally had. So you would imagine that one of those at least stays, if not two. Technically, I wonder whether Postecoglou has a look at Tanganga and thinks with his versatility and ability to play on the left or the right of the back four, of those two centre-back positions, whether maybe he has another look at him. And I know people will be thinking, Tanganga's no good, Tanganga's this. Postecoglou is good at developing not only attacking players but also defensive players. We'll talk about a certain Spurs player who left to play under him for the last 2 years, and if he could do something similar with Tanganga, who knows? Who knows? I know there was AC Milan were interested in. Sorry, Harry Kane's just scored. That was why I was distracted. Even smashed in the face, Harry Kane will go and still score a goal. The man's just a machine. He really is. But with Tanganga, yeah, he had interest in Italy. AC Milan wanted him, and I think there are a couple of other Italian clubs that have looked at him in recent years. It seems to be the thing in Italy now, isn't it? Is looking at younger English players as well. But again, I'd be stunned. It doesn't say it wouldn't happen, but I'd be stunned if all four centre-backs were to leave other than Romero. It would seem a huge overhaul that would be very rare for any club to do. And again, we've got kind of, I hate that, I'm not a big fan of the expression trust the process, but it's used quite a lot in football. But I guess if the manager sees something that maybe we haven't seen, you've kind of got to trust his view on it. And I guess this is what is the biggest thing with a new manager coming in, is that all players suddenly have a fresh slate, regardless of what happened before. They very well can come in and have a set idea of what they want to do, regardless of the manager. That can happen. And it can be sometimes that a club just decides, no, we need to get the value because of the contract, we need to get the money. But for the bulk of players, the manager can have a look at them and give them a whole fresh start. And who knows out of those if anyone suddenly becomes a new thing under Postecoglou, or not a new thing, a better player. Because it's a different system. This is the other thing. The defenders are going to have to focus on different aspects to what they were focused on under Conte, under Nuno, under Mourinho. Probably slightly more similar to how they would have been under Poch, those players like Dyer. I mean, you could argue that Dyer was a better defender maybe under Poch at times. Certainly better. I do wonder if he'd stayed in midfield, whether he'd have had a better career. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. It's quite an interesting one. I might even do an article on that at some point. It's an interesting kind of sliding doors moment. If he'd remained in the midfield, I feel like if I remember, it was he wanted to go back in defence and Poch felt he'd be a better midfielder. But it ended up that necessity, he ended up going back. Do you remember in this first one, he was a midfielder that split the back two. He would come back sometimes. And then his next season, he actually became part of almost the back three most of the time. Don't know. Who knows? But excuse me. In terms of defenders coming in, they're looking all over the place, to be honest. They're looking at home and abroad. There's a real kind of push to be more data analytics based in decision making at Spurs now, and that's an area that I've told you before they're looking to improve within the club. You've got, when we're looking at first at the Premier League, I know, and I reported this before, and I know it's very much still the case, they love Mark Guay. Oh, I'm so bad with pronunciations. Someone needs to just give me a lesson sitting down. You know, like when the FIFA commentators, they sit down and they pronounce all, and you hear them saying it loads of times recording. I need to do that. The Crystal Palace and England defender, who's, you know, he's only 22. He's a terrific player. He's had a terrific season as well. But from what I understand, Spurs still have a massive interest in him. They really, really like him. But the problem is, so do most of the top clubs in England, and I'd imagine abroad as well. And because of that, and the fact that he's got 3 years left on his contract, from what I understand, Palace, if they were even to look to let him go, would require big money. Big money. And because they know that competition's there, which naturally drives up the price even higher as well. So I do wonder whether that takes him out of Spurs' market, as it were. Especially, yeah, I just think it kind of does, unfortunately, because I think he's just had such a good year for Palace, and also for, you know, he's playing matches for England now. Yeah, shame, because I think he would be brilliant in the Spurs backline. Max Kilman at Wolves is another one, homegrown player that I know they've looked at in the last couple of seasons. 26, played really well under Julian Lopetegui. Good with the ball at his feet as well. Again, another important part of the Postecoglou way. I know there's been a bit of buzz recently about Spurs keeping an eye on what's happening with Aymeric Laporte at Man City as well. He's kind of found himself out of the starting 11 in recent months because of the form of others. But I think Barcelona are looking at him as well. I'm trying to think. I feel like he's maybe got 2 years left on his contract. I could be wrong, but I feel like it was that kind of number. But I would still imagine City don't let players go on the cheap. For all that they will spend on a player, they don't let them go easily either. So, yeah, it's a difficult one. Those three, you'd maybe see Kilman as the one who'd maybe be the most gettable. But even Wolves, Wolves don't let players go for cheap either. And again, quite right. I can even hear the voices now, people saying, why have Spurs got to go for cheap players? I get it. if they want to make a statement in their defence. I think they need to sign a big defender that makes a huge difference, and also bring in a younger defender who they feel can become a star as well. And that, like I say, sounds like they want to have an experienced one and a young one. I mean, you look back about because this is the other thing about the Postecoglou system, is it's so different, and that thus requires different targets to last summer's one. So you look at last summer, you'll remember me telling you that the top two on Paratici's wish list for Conte, although how gettable they were, we kind of saw the answer to that was Josko Gvardiol from Leipzig and Alessandro Bastoni from Inter Milan. They were difficult targets back then, and I think now they're probably way out of Spurs' market. I think I'm pretty sure, well, I definitely did actually. I remember saying it, I'm sure I wrote it in articles as well. Back then, Gvardiol, it was always likely Man City were going to be leading the chase for him if he were to come onto the market, which he didn't back then. And it sounds like, reportedly, they're going to tie up an £85 million deal for him. He's only 21 as well. I think he's going to be Laporte's replacement by the sound of it as well. Bastoni was a different one. From what I understood at the time, Spurs were willing to meet the price tag for him, but Bastoni just had no interest. He was so kind of Inter through and through, wasn't he? He was got all tattoos and everything, and didn't really want to leave the club at all. And the only way I think he would have gone is if they'd really tried to push him out the door because of his contract situation. But that didn't happen. Obviously had a big season, reached a Champions League final, and there's talk there now that he's about to sign an extended new deal, or certainly the Inter are going to try to, as soon as he comes back from this bout of international football, although I think he was ill, I think he missed the last game for Italy, they're going to extend his contract. So, like I say, the two kind of big names from last year, for differing reasons, are kind of not really in the mix anymore, seemingly. Gvardiol was always, for me, I always felt he was the one that they would have loved more than anyone, but he was also the one they were probably least likely to get because he's just top of the tree. He really is. And look, you look at other ones that they've been linked with in recent weeks. There's another Croatian, Josip Sutalo. I've seen him. Roger Ibanez, Roma centre-back. He's had a good season, but it almost feels like he's been, again, we talk about hawking players around Europe. It almost feels like, is it Pinto at Roma, that they've almost been trying to get him, not get him, force him out of the club, but certainly circulating his names with various clubs as well. I saw today that Edmund Tapsoba, the Bayer Leverkusen centre-back, Burkina Faso international, 24-year-old, is another one that's been linked to Spurs as well. There's enough very good centre-backs out there. There's no reason why Spurs can't make a big improvement to their back line with the right man. Other ones I remember last year that they were certainly really keeping an eye on were Pau Torres, of course, of Villarreal, although I think he might be going to Villa to link up with Unai Emery. Again, that's been a big suggestion. Ilya Zabani as well. Spurs really liked him. I don't really understand why that didn't end up being someone that they chased that little bit more. Maybe it was because, like I said, they couldn't get players out of the door. But I know they really liked him. Obviously, then ended up going to Bournemouth. And after an ankle injury, kind of started to get games towards the end of the season as they stayed up as well. So, yeah, obviously managerless Bournemouth now. I don't get that. I saw that and Darren Moore going from Sheffield Wednesday. Just some decisions in football that are crazy. But there you go. Gleison Bremer as well. I had him on my list. I was just looking back at my list from players from last year that I know Spurs were really hot on. Bremer went from Torino to Juventus, didn't he? Wonder whether he comes onto the market or not this summer. Another good defender. There are so many to look at. This is what I mean. And do you know what? It's funny, after talking about all these new ones, from what I understand, speaking to people within the club, it hasn't been ruled out that they might still go back for Clement Longley. It hasn't. I know a couple of days ago, they did it's not like a farewell, but the players who have kind of left the club, and as a formality, they included Clement Longley because his loan ended. If you weren't aware, there was no loan option to buy no option to make his deal permanent, Clement Longley, so he just left at the end of his deal. But from the talk, Barcelona want him out. I think I saw some suggestion in the Spanish media that Barcelona haven't even contacted him since he's left. I don't know whether that's true. Just like I said, it's just in the Spanish media. But there has been suggestions that he could be available for as little as something like 4 or 5 million now, which it's a difficult one because you talk about those players and maybe all those other ones going that you might get a fee for. As a squad option, for me, Longley, 4 or 5 million, I don't think that's that bad a deal at all. Again, putting your football side away and just thinking from a business point of view, it's almost an investment because you could probably sell him for double that next summer. I didn't really have a big kind of thing against Longley. I know some people kind of decided they did. I thought he had a mixed season. I thought on the whole it was probably more positive. But the problem with Longley, I think, is that he just obviously was part of a defence that conceded so many goals, and that's what people will see. But I just wonder whether in a better functioning defence that wasn't quite an absolute chaotic mess, maybe he plays better. I don't know. He's certainly got the technique, I feel, for the Postecoglou defence. In terms, I think his distribution is very good. It would just be that ability to turn in the high line would be something he'd have to work on. But yeah, I quite like Longley, and he's a strong and positive influence from what I was told in the dressing room as well. Very focused, hard-working guy. No problem whatsoever. Not, to be honest, very few Spurs players ever are in the last few years. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see what they do with Longley. It's one to keep an eye on, but I genuinely wouldn't be stunned if they went back for him. I don't know whether I've heard people saying, but does that mean he's one of the 2 centre-backs? I don't know. Again, they could then let 3 or 4 of those defenders go, and then you bring in Longley as another squad option. You know, he might be more willing to be part of a rotation option than someone like Dyer, let's say, or Sanchez. So it's all kind of swings around. I don't know. It could end up being Longley and 2 others. It could be that Longley ends up being experienced when they bring in a younger one, or it could be that because they're bringing Longley back, they bring in a top quality defender as well as him as a squad option. I don't know. I don't want to. It's one of those where if you kind of have a guess or a stab at it, something else happens, and for some reason people think you've said something as gospel and that's the way it's going to go. And I kind of teased or hinted towards it before, but yeah, a player that you'd imagine, I would be surprised if it did happen, but I've mentioned it before, Cameron Carter-Vickers. Everyone will be just going, oh, and they'll be sighing. I know they will, because they will remember the young Spurs player who was a work in progress. He was very raw at Spurs. He was very much someone that fans wouldn't have seen too much of because he was constantly out on loan. I think he had something like 5 or 6 loans while he was at Spurs. But what I would say is he went away to work at Postecoglou for 2 years and he developed hugely. He was so good for Celtic. And I know people will say, oh, but it's the Scottish League, it's not as strong as the Premier League and all that. But the key thing I would say to take away from it is that he was fantastic in the Postecoglou system. Postecoglou raved about him. If you look up the things he said about him, he said that, he's admitted that being a centre-back in his system is not easy, but actually Carter-Vickers just absolutely slotted into it and played really well in it. And there's a lot of people within Celtic who were stunned that Spurs let him go. I think the deal was something like 6 million, possibly rising to 10 with add-ons. And he's expected to come back to the Premier League one way or another. There's a lot of Premier League clubs, I think, looking at Carter-Vickers. He's still only 25, I think he is now. Spurs don't really look too much back at old players or old managers, seemingly. But, I wouldn't be stunned if Carter-Vickers is playing in the Premier League within the next 24 months or so. Talking of academy, I understand, I think, the 2 leading kind of centre-backs in the academy that he will probably have a look at this season, certainly in pre-season, Postecoglou, will be Alfie Dorrington, 18-year-old England youth international who's as we said in the last videos, just signed a new deal with the club. He definitely is up there. And also Maxim Pascozzi as well, who's had a bit of a nightmare of a season for a variety of reasons and ended the season with a all kind of injury or illness related. He had a back problem that kind of saw off the end of his season. But from what I understand, he's all good and all will be absolutely raring to go for pre-season. So that's a good thing. So he's 20, he's a little bit older than Alfie. So maybe keep an eye on pre-season, whether those two get a little bit of a kind of a look in from Postecoglou, because as we'll explain a little bit towards the end of this, when it comes to pre-season, those early days, there's going to be some young players who really will have a chance to impress him. Every new manager kind of almost likes to make a bit of a statement of having a few young players go on the tour, the pre-season tour. And you know, for those two, certainly with centre-backs, they've got a chance to kind of stake their claim to get minutes here and there, especially in, you know, the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup. Obviously no European football, but certainly those two domestic competitions. And then when we're looking at the full-back positions at Spurs, I kind of feel that's the one, unless there's an absolutely superb deal that suddenly crops up, you're probably less likely to see Spurs make a move. And that does happen. You know, I always remember, actually, we're going to talk about him in a minute, but Sergio Reguilon, they weren't really looking for a left-back that summer, and then this deal came up for him, and he was a player that the club really liked. And Mourinho was very well aware of as well. And they just thought, oh, do you know what? It's a kind of an investment. And of course, this is the problem with Spurs. They've made these kind of quite bigger money. You know, he was 28, 30 million Reguilon. And it ended up being a deal that didn't really work out for them. And that recruitment has not been good enough over the years as well. And picking players that either don't adapt to the Premier League or don't adapt to a certain manager's setup. But yeah, in terms of the fullbacks now, it kind of feels like there's enough on each side to, at least for Postecoglou, to work with this season. I mean, on the right, you've got Emerson Royale, who's definitely got the engine to be a Postecoglou right back, and obviously back in his more natural role rather than trying to be a wing back. From what I understand, Postecoglou likes Pedro Porro. I don't think it's any coincidence that they are both part of the same agency represented as well. CAA Base represents them both, so he will be well aware of him. Obviously, if you're not aware, Porro's deal, there's an obligation that becomes a £40 million permanent signing this summer. And obviously, Postecoglou will just have to work with his ability to become a natural right back. But also, I'd say probably use him further up the pitch as well at times as a winger. Maybe that's what he ends up seeing as his position. I asked Ryan Mason about that a couple of weeks ago, and he said, yeah, it could end up being his final position because he impacts games from that position on the pitch. Then you've got Jed Spence. I would say with fewer fixtures really this season, if in pre-season Jed can't make a massive impression on Postecoglou, you would imagine he'll be handed the opportunity to go out. I mean, the length of his contract kind of allows you to send him out on loan, a bit like Cesc did when he went to Hoffenheim, just to give him a full season somewhere, just to really kind of push on his development. And that's kind of the right-hand side. There probably are enough people there. On the left, you've got Destiny Udogie coming in, finally from Udinese, with a lot of people in Italy tipping him to make a major impact in the Premier League. You've got Ben Davies as the kind of experienced, versatile option down that side. There's kind of almost a bit of a safe pair of hands. Again, I know he's someone that people associate with this kind of failures of the past, of not winning silverware. But you know my view on Ben Davies. I would say I would never lump him in with players that other fans do as being systematic of problems at Spurs or whatever. He is a guy that there is a reason that every single manager comes in and really likes him. They're not told to keep him. No one says to him, oh yeah, keep that Welsh lad. Yeah, could you do that? Don't worry, just keep him around somewhere. They all love Ben Davies because of what he brings on and off the pitch, and he's just there. He's a guy that probably will always give you at least a 6 or a 7 out of 10, probably a 7 out of 10. Yes, he'll have days when he has a bit of a flap at something, and he'll have days when he maybe gets outpaced by people, but on the whole, I think he's far more consistent than people give him credit for. But again, I'm not going to go down the Ben Davies route. People get very annoyed. So you've got him, you've got a doggy, you've got Ryan Sessegnon, who, from what I understand, honestly, my last week has been spent speaking to various people around players, various agents, various people in and around the club, people in and around other clubs as well in the last week. And everything I keep hearing about Sess is that he's now finally almost there, fully fit. It was a very serious hamstring injury he's had. Unfortunately, not the first hamstring problem he's had, but he is expected to be able to hit the ground running in pre-season. So he is going to be one of those who's going to really want to impress Postecoglou early on. If he isn't able to do that and he can't promise him the game time he needs, then from what I understand, I think he will be allowed to head off. Sessegnon, again, what's he got? 2 years left on his deal. You've probably got enough space there to do one more loan if you want, but you would imagine that maybe with 2 years left, it's a difficult one because are you going to get the value for him this year because of his injury problems of last season? I don't know. So maybe you need the loan to not only build his confidence, but maybe in a cynical way build up his value as well. Yeah. So, yeah. Of course, Reguilón. I spoke about him as well. Sergio Reguilón. I get the impression he's like to move on. Tough loan at Atletico Madrid. Injuries, illness, not a good one for him. Barely played any games. He started towards the end, get a few minutes in, but it was kind of very, very late in the day. I think Spurs will look to probably sell him. And then you got Perisic as well, obviously. Plays on that left-hand side. He's not going to fit as a left-back. You only it's whether you keep him as a winger. I would imagine he leaves this summer. That's the indication I'm getting. The only thing with him, again, and I said this earlier, it's wages. It's whether another club can match his wages because he's he's a high-earning player. But yeah, I do wonder whether he ends up heading back to Italy or who knows, maybe, with the Saudi influx. That's not influx, is the right word. What's the word I'm looking for? A lot of players, a whole flood of players heading in that direction to that league. Maybe that's somewhere he looks at as well at this stage in his career. I don't know, but I'm not entirely sure I see Perisic in the Postecoglou system. He's got the energy still at his age, but I just wonder at that age and knowing you've only got a year left, it's not really building for the future. So, yeah, I think Perisic will probably be one of those who heads out the door. So the priority, like I say, is the defence, but that's not to say that they are not looking further up the pitch as well. From what I understand, when you're looking at midfield and attack, they're looking for a new attacking midfielder for the centre of the pitch who can operate in both a 4-3-3, which is Postecoglou's preferred system at Celtic, but he's also a 4-2-3-1, which he's played at times as well. So they're looking for a central attacking midfielder who can play in both of those. And they're also looking for, what I understand, a young winger. We shall see what they bring and what that comes. So when you talk about that midfield that I was just discussing, so you've heard me explain this before, but just for anyone new that hasn't heard me say this, the Postecoglou midfield has a number 6 pivot player. Pivot. That was, sorry, my Ross from Friends moment. Number 6 pivot and 2 number 8s who box to box. The number 6 essentially collects the ball quickly from the centre backs and sprays it very quickly out to the wings or forward to the more attacking players. Technically the wingers are the more attacking players, and the centre forward. Number 8's box to box go up and they support that centre forward. And actually, they'd be the attacking players, and number 6 would quickly spread the ball too. So there was a logic. I knew I was getting somewhere with what I was saying. So Spurs have got loads of players that can fulfil that pivot role. You've got Bentancur, Basuma can both play there. Skip can play there as well. I'd say Basuma and Bentancur can probably play either the number 6 or number 8 role. Skip, more number 6. Postecoglou's got to make a decision on Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, from what I understand. Look, despite his definitely increased attacking output last season, I still don't know if he's a natural fit for either of those two roles in a Postecoglou system. And yeah, I just wonder. I think his contract maybe is it last 2 years. I think it's coming into, and I think you're at that stage whether it's a bit does he stay, does he go kind of time. And he is a player that Spurs would get some reasonable money for as well. Bayern Munich, certainly one of the clubs that have been looking at bringing him back to them. I think I saw just before I came on here there was some noise from on the continent that maybe Atletico Madrid were possibly looking at him. I think I'm not someone that gets on Højbjerg's back at all. I do think he's had some iffy games last season, but I do also think a lot of that was to do with the team was just generally rubbish at times. And I think he definitely suffered from not having Bentancur alongside him at times. He and Skip, I always felt, were too similar. But if I'm going to be kind of brutal about it, I think you probably could remove Højbjerg from that group and Spurs would probably be okay because of the other alternatives. And I think he could be a very good player elsewhere. Honestly, I think he's a guy that does give a lot on the pitch, and I do think he's made an overall positive impact at Spurs in his time. And he's the kind of player that, yes, there's times when I see him throw his hands up in the air and not do everything you want him to do, but I've also probably seen far more times when he's thrown himself into stuff and managed to get things to Spurs and get back and make challenges. And he's also a little bit of a master of the dark arts, that little bit of nous, that little bit of being clever on the pitch, being a bit of a pain in the backside that you do need in a squad. But yeah, we'll see what happens with him. It may be that he and Postecoglou have a chat and absolutely click, and they have very similar ideas and mentality, and it might work. But again, like I say, it's down to Postecoglou. Postecoglou will have the final say on any player this summer. This idea that sometimes we have, fans have, anyone has, that players will be forced upon a manager. Look, from time to time they will make a signing. We saw it last season of players that they think will be a star, and if you could fit them in, that would be great. I don't think that's the right way to operate myself, but it can happen, and it can happen at most clubs. I think that's the idea of a head coach thing, is that sometimes you will bring in players that are for the long-term aspect. But certainly in terms of players that will leave the club, and on the whole, the players that come in, I'd hope on the whole completely, it will be Postecoglou's approval. Like with Kulusevski, we'll talk about him a little moment. That was Postecoglou gave the approval for that. You might have heard Indy barking there. He's downstairs with the girls. So yeah, that's Højbjerg. Pape Matar Sarr. Again, another one. I think there's bundles of potential for Postecoglou to work with there. I can really imagine him in the number 8 role. One of those kind of getting up and down the pitch, and got a great engine, very good technique. He could be a terrific player. If I'm Pape Matar Sarr, I'm getting back early. He did that after the World Cup, came back early to work with Conte, which really impressed him. Does similar, I feel, for Postecoglou, and I think, could really be one of those players that we see step up with a lot more minutes this season. In terms of the youngsters, like I said about the defenders, I think obviously Alfie Devine's the standout one for me. I think he could maybe end up with a spot on the tour, heading off to Australia and Asia, before a decision is made on whether he heads out on a loan. Personally, I know there's a lot of people that want to see him for Spurs, maybe in the Cups. If I'm Alfie, I'm probably wanting to try and start every week somewhere on a loan move. I think that might be more beneficial to him. I think again, it's a lack of European football really messes up these opportunities to get these young players little bits of minutes here and there because there's so many fixtures. So yeah, keep an eye on Alfie and what happens with him. Obviously, we just said Kulusevski came in on a permanent deal, £25.6 million. Payable over 6 years as well. So look, I know we moan about what leaving the club do in terms of haggling and things like that, but it's getting a bit almost, it's €5 million they've got off the fee. It went down from €35 million to 30 million. That's a bargain. that is a bargain and a half. And it's actually payable over more years, 6 than it was originally. It was 5. I saw the quotes from Kulusevski that came out, I think, yesterday or last night from the Sweden camp about how he wasn't that impressed with the time it took. I get that. I guess as a player, maybe you feel like maybe you weren't wanted. But look, I've said this to you over weeks. There was never any feeling within Spurs they weren't going to sign him. As I said, on all the promotional stuff, on all the kit stuff, as one of the quick tabs, you could get his name on your shirt instantly for next season. And from everything I heard in the club, that Postecoglou approved it as well. Was quite happy to have him in. I think he'll make a great. I think he'd be terrific in the right-sided role, whether it be in a 4-3-3 or whether it be a 4-2-3-1. I think he'd be terrific there. But I also feel that in a 4-3-3 could potentially be one of those number 8s. I do feel it because they have so much attacking to do in that system. And he told me that he sees himself as more as a number 10. That's his favourite role. Why not? Why not? Maybe in the middle of a 4-2-3-1 as well, in the 3 behind the striker. But I like Kulusevski a lot. You know that. We don't have to go on too much about him because I've spoken about him before. But yeah, what I said earlier, when it comes to new players coming in, the new central midfielder they'd like, attacking midfielder, is someone that can play in that 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1. And that is why you were seeing these heavy links with James Maddison, who they've liked for years. They've liked him. I remember them trying to sign him before he went to Leicester. Yeah, they've liked him for a long time. And he can play in a range of roles. He could be in the midfield 3, he could be the centre of the 3 behind the striker, like I just said about Kulusevski. He could play in the right of the front 3 like Kulusevski as well, but he can play that deeper role. I looked back because I remembered it being a really good season. The 2021-2022 season, Maddison was directly involved in 30 goals for Leicester. Scored 18, assists were 12. Even last year, which is a bit of an injury-fragmented campaign, and obviously within a very struggling, eventually relegated side, he ended up getting, what I wrote down here, 10 goals and 9 assists in 32 matches. Postecoglou's understood to like him. Again, you'll hear me say this quite a lot. There is this link, again, that both men are represented by Base, the agency. They've got a real growing presence at Spurs right now, Base. They have, who have they got? They've got Sonny, they've got Richarlison, they've got Porro. Even the youngsters, if you look at them, some of the more talented ones in there, Alfie Devine, I've just mentioned him, Dane Scarlett, Jamie Donnelly, I think they're all Base clients. It's a real, starting to be a thing. We're not talking Jorge Mendes kind of style here, but Base have got a big hand or fingerprints are all over Spurs right now. He's got good sides and bad sides. Good sides in that, Spurs really want to play like James Maddison. It becomes a lot easier because it's all a little bit incestuous, I guess, of trying to make that happen. He literally is on my screen right now, walking out for the second half of the England game. That was weird. But yeah, it's. I know there's been a bit of a buzz around those who cover the England team, saying that there's been a suggestion within the camp that Maddison has been, not Maddison, or just the talk around Maddison that is he prefers Spurs over Newcastle. It's a big ask in terms of when you're looking at it on paper, because Newcastle got the money, they've got the Champions League football, they're clearly going in the right direction. Eddie Howe's obviously doing a great job there. But there is that old cliche of the lure of London. And Tottenham, obviously, there is that little bit of excitement right now. And the way they'll play football under Postecoglou will absolutely bring out the best of someone like Maddison. And obviously, if Harry Kane looks like he is staying, and it seems to be the case right now, Maddison will be linking up with Kane and providing the ammunition for him to score every week as well. And he'll know a lot of those players within that club as well. Like I said, got loads of his agency mates there as well. So I can understand the logic behind him wanting to go there, although on paper Newcastle would look like the safer bet, I guess is the way to put it. I think he would be fantastic for Spurs. I think he would fit the system like a glove. And I would be very excited to see what he could do for Tottenham in a Spurs shirt. He really could be something special. But we'll see. They've got other targets, Spurs, if that one wasn't to happen. I kind of feel like he was a player that they seriously looked at bringing last year, and I do wonder whether this year, more so in the Postecoglou's system. And again, I think he's got, is Maddison another one with 12 months left on his contract. So you'd imagine, because of how good he's been in the Premier League and the numbers that he's put up, even when they've been struggling, yeah, I think you're talking about a decent wedge of money for him to come. Probably 45, 50 maybe alone for him. But again, it comes down to that. Yes, he's got 12 months left, but do you sign a player who is fit and ready to fit into the Premier League and the system that he's going to be playing in? It's not too dissimilar in terms of the formation, certainly, than he was playing at Leicester in previous seasons. But yeah, they'll have other targets. If you're going to go down the League One division, and I know people will be like, what? How could he go for? Although saying that, if Maddison were to stay, he would also be in the Championship. But I do understand that they've still got a real kind of interest in Alex Scott, the young Bristol City, very talented. He's a teenager at the moment. He turns 20 this summer, and from what I understand, Spurs have asked to be kept apprised of his situation, is the way to put it. No move as of yet, but definitely one that they've been told, they've told those around him just to let them know. Let them know if something looks like Bristol are going to sell, and looks like there's a certain value that comes out for him. It feels like at the moment Bristol are looking for something in the range of 20 million. Got 2 years left on his contract. Central midfielder again. I think again the problem is competition. Is that if Spurs were to suddenly go in, I think a lot of other clubs suddenly come in as well. But then, Spurs, you want to go for the best players, you've got to make the best case for yourself. Saka just scored an incredible goal. Talking of great players, he's superb. But yeah, with Alex Scott, he can play, across the in the central midfield. He can play on the right of midfield. There's other Premier League clubs that are seriously looking at him, and in Europe as well. England under-20 style. He hasn't actually got into the England 21s yet. He plays with Alfie Devine and Dane Scarlett in the under-20s, but he is going to be something special. That's the general feeling with him. And for me, again, I feel like it's one that kind of goes into a bit of the no-brainer category. I think there's got to be a fear now that with some people think, it's going to be another, let's say, a Jack Clark, who ironically is really starting to rebuild his career. Jack, and he could really have a terrific career as he goes on. But I don't know. For me, I'm looking at that, and I think maybe if you go in there with a 15 million with add-ons, a bit like they did with Jed Spence, you probably make that money back even if you're going to loan him out for the first couple of years. But I do think he's a player that will adapt quite quickly to the Premier League. So, yeah, keep an eye on what happens with him. There's some suggestion that he might also be a Spurs fan. Not that that's be-all and end-all. What club you support, you'll find with professionals it really doesn't make much difference. It does make some of them stay on at clubs longer than they should have done, maybe. But, yeah, let's see what happens with him. But there'll be a load of... If Maddison looks like it's not going Spurs' way, I don't know. That's kind of... I feel it's one of those where... We'll see how Newcastle respond to these reports that maybe he's more interested in Spurs. But if I'm Spurs, I think it's one you try and push over the deal. And maybe that's why we're not seeing too many other names linked with Spurs in that midfield department. In terms of other midfielders at the club... you've got various returning players. You've got Tongi and Dembele. Postecoglou's going to have a look at him and decide what happens with him next. I spoke about him last week, and he does fit the system, but it's all on Tongi because it's a system that requires a lot of work, real box-to-box stuff, unless you played him as the number 6, which he could play, to be fair. We'll see. We'll see what pre-season brings. I would love it to happen. Do I think it's going to happen? Yeah, maybe not, but I would love it to happen. I am still the president of the Tanguy Ndombele Association Appreciation Society. Lo Celso for me feels like there's interest in him, and as a saleable asset, he's someone that goes to help put more funds towards moves that come in. Again, I actually think he would fit the system, but I just think he's maybe at that point where he just naturally moves on. Harry Winks, again, final 12 months of his contract. You would think that he moves on now as well. Harvey White, obviously only young, lots of talent, but you would maybe think, unless, again, he could be the one that Postecoglou looks at and thinks, there's my young player, I'm going to push through. But otherwise, I can see him being allowed to leave just to go out and get regular football, really. It's what he needs right now at 21. And a winger. Like I say, from what I understand, they're looking for preferably a young winger, probably, to complement the other. Because if you look at it, you've got Sonny, you've got Kane, you've got Richarlison. You've got Kulusevski, who actually you kind of forget he's still only 23 now. But yeah, there are kind of probably more senior options up front now. Another kind of young talent to come in as well. Obviously, you've got to replace Lucas and Danjuma, who Spurs didn't take the option on as well. So you've technically, especially if it's a front three, at the moment, you've only got 4 players for it, as in of players that were there last season. So Brian Hill, obviously, to come back as well. I think Postecoglou, if I'm Postecoglou, I have a really good look at Brighton Hill because, again, ticks a lot of the boxes for a Postecoglou winger. There's going to be continuing questions over his physicality and the ability to adapt to the Premier League, but you look at the likes of Bernardo Silva as well, and I said it last week. I think it's just there's no reason why he can't do it. So again, he's another one for me that you think comes back early pre-season, tries to make a real impact. He's a very, very fit, high energy player. I wouldn't write off Brian Hill. It could be that Postecoglou sees him and thinks, no, he's still not strong enough for me for what I want to play. But he's got to be on that list of players that he has a proper look at. It would be such a waste. He's only 22. Comes back as a Europa League winner. I remember him being one of the fittest players in South Korea last season on the pre-season. I hope he really does have a proper look at him. But then obviously, yes, they have to look outside the club as well for young wingers to come in. I know he's not technically young winger anymore, and he's probably slightly over that age range that I think they're looking at. But it's no shock, we know it now, and we've known it for a while. Harvey Barnes is a player of interest. I really like Harvey Barnes. I think he's a terrific player. He's 25 now, but he got... even their struggles last season, 13 goals and 3 assists he got for them from the left last season. The one before that, he got 25 goal involvements, 11 scored, 14 assists in 47 matches. I think he's a terrific player. I think there's a lot of interest in him as well. Certainly seeing West Ham linked with him. And I think there's a few other Premier League clubs yet to be named that I think are hovering about looking at Harvey Barnes. I know there was talk of a double deal for them. I thought I saw a £50 million bid. The club are insisting that they have not yet made a bid for them. I can only say that's what the club are insisting. I know that's not to do down in reports. That may well be that that's what happened. I would say, personally, at 50 million is very, very small bid for those two players as a combined thing. But again, that's not to say it didn't happen. I don't like to put down other reporters' work because it could be absolutely spot on, and it could just be that the club are trying to say it didn't happen. But certainly that's the noise coming out of the club, is that didn't happen. But certainly there is a potential interest in that deal happening, is the vibe you get when you ask around the club. So yeah, keep an eye on Barnes. Keep an eye on, I think it would appear that Maddison is probably the priority out of the two, but they're both very, very talented players in different ways. They really are. he could, obviously is played on the left mainly, but he can play on either flank if required as well. So he'd be able to really be a versatile option up there. And then we come to up front. Up front, especially if Kane looks like sticking around, there's not really an opportunity, a need for another striker unless you were to bring in a young winger who can also play up front, a bit like Danjuma could. I know he's not a young winger, but that kind of versatility. Because if you look at it, I mean, with Harry Kane right now, it certainly feels like the likes of Man U have just thought, right, this isn't going to happen. Then you've got the word from Spurs is still very strongly no intention to sell, especially to a Premier League club, which leaves you your Real Madrids, and I know there's been talk of PSG as well. It's a difficult one. The lure of PSG is there. I can see that. Is it the right move for Kane at this point in his career? I'd maybe argue it isn't. Real Madrid, you can't argue against that at all, I think, in terms of just the size of the club and what they represent. But also, there doesn't appear to be much of a sense that Real Madrid are currently looking to reach the kind of figure that Spurs would offer for even start talking about Kane for, which means he sticks around for now, certainly for the next 12 months at least. Spurs try to tie him down to a new deal. Postecoglou's system will bring chances galore for him to score even more, and then we'll see what happens with him. But like I say, with him there, you've got Richarlison, who, as you heard me say in the last video, probably actually fits the classic Postecoglou centre-forward role better. That thankless, sacrificing yourself almost, constant running and pressing role. But as I did say in the last video, Postecoglou has also at other clubs in the past tweaked his system, enabled to bring in players who maybe had a bit more of a playmaker side to them, a false nine side to them. So he can do that. But you've got Kane, you've got Richarlison, you've got Sonny can play through the centre as well very effectively. So I don't think that, as in the past, when Spurs desperately need another striker, I don't think that's the case this summer. Richarlison, he's saying all the right things recently. I know he said something along the lines of, anyone would be tempted by Real Madrid, but he made it very clear that, only because he's come on my screen, young midfielder Spurs also looked at Conor Gallagher is another player that they've got a bit of an interest in as well, but haven't taken that any further at this point, Chelsea midfielder. But yeah, back to Richarlison. He'll have a better season. Of course he will. So many players in their second season do. He said it himself, he's got to justify that big £60 million transfer fee. Let's see what happens with him. But in terms of those three, I think you're covered really. And then you've got the younger ones. You've got Troy Parrott, Dane Scarlett. I'd imagine unless an early loan offer comes in from them that tempts all sides, you would think they would both probably head off on the summer tour to be given a chance to work under Postecoglou. And then it's about deciding whether they're going to better served getting minutes with Spurs in the Cups at all, or whether they're better served having a full season elsewhere. And Troy got a lot of minutes at Preston. Dane did for the first half of the season at Portsmouth until John Messina came in, didn't really use him much. Personally, I think probably for Dane, it's time for another loan move. For Troy, I would like to see him now try to push for some minutes at Spurs. And if he does go on loan, he's got to score more goals. I think he's at that age now where the goals have to start coming. He's a very good finisher, just didn't really score many at Preston, unfortunately, last season. So there you go. That's it, really. That's looking at the needs at Spurs. And there will be more names that come out in the coming weeks, no doubt, as well. Hopefully, they push hard for Raya and Maddison, because you get those two early doors and you've got two big building blocks for Postecoglou to work with. If they're going to push for anything, I would really push for those two straight away. But it's Tottenham. We know they like to draw things out. And the trouble is, when you draw things out, you sometimes make the players feel that maybe they're not wanted that much, and you let the door open for other people to come in. But there you go. Life at Tottenham Hotspur. Pre-season. starts next month. Normally it's around the first Monday of July, which would be July the 3rd this season. But from what I understand, some players could come back a little bit earlier, Saturday, July the 1st. That's officially Postecoglou's first day. So I think some of them might come back early. To be honest, on those first day or two, mostly it's all about fitness tests. It's not really much ball work and stuff on the pitches. It's more about seeing where they are at fitness-wise. But yeah, you'd think anyone who's really looking to impress will probably try to get back for that. The non-internationals, I should stress. The internationals will be given more time. They'll be given more weeks to rest and recover. I know they had a week and a half or so before the internationals to have a bit of a rest. But yeah, they need a bit of recovery time afterwards. Otherwise, they're just going from one very long season that contained the World Cup straight into the next season. And for Udogie and Skippy, they've got the Euros, the under-21 Euros, which I think the group stages go up to the end of June. If they were to be either of them get through to the final, I think that's July the 8th, which is only about a week before they head off to Australia and Perth to go off and start their tour work, their camp, pre-season camp over there. So yeah, be interesting to see who. You always get that phase as well where you get some of the players that are clearly heading out the door don't train with the first team, and you get that little message saying that they're not going on the tour that the club give out. So, yeah, I'd be interested to see which ones get that treatment. I always remember it was Danny Rose, Vincent Janssen, Nkudu, and someone else one summer. We always, because obviously I'm one of the ones, there's only a few of us actually this year heading off on the tour, and we're always wondering who's going to be there to interview and who the club are going to try and maybe not want us to interview because of the things they might say. Yes, I want to interview Tongi if he were to go on the tour, but whether he ends up being one of them, we'll see. So there's a long way to go before that can happen. What else we got? New contracts, Mikey Moore. Mikey Moore has committed his immediate future to Spurs, which is fantastic. If you're not aware who Mikey is, he is only 15 years old, and he is such a talent in the academy. He's got a long way to go. You know, it's definitely one of those we can't go too overboard because even at 15, you know, it's all about hard work and obviously his injuries. Anyone's read my feature, my big interview with Terry Dixon I did a few years ago. One of the most gifted 16-year-olds you'll ever see in the game. And unfortunately, it just didn't happen for him because of some really awful knee injuries. But hopefully, fingers crossed for Mikey, there's nothing like that because he could be absolutely sensational. He's had a lot of Premier League clubs, top clubs after him, top clubs in Europe after him. But he is about to, I think he already has put pen to paper with Spurs, and that will be announced, I think, within the clutch of academy contracts that will come out in the coming days. Yeah, it's a little bit of a coup for Spurs. It is and it's a signal, I think, that the academy there is a feeling that Postecoglou will create a better pathway as well. Been some academy changes. Dean Rastrick obviously left. The academy manager, he's done a terrific job over the years. Just wanted a new challenge. But yeah, with Mikey Moore signing on, that's a bit of an indication, I think, for other players as well. That, if he's sticking around, he clearly believes something could happen. And I'll be intrigued to see how quickly they accelerate his progress because they've got to be careful. He turned 16, I think, this summer. You've got to be careful with him. He is still so young. But if, you've watched him in the under-18s Premier League final and the under-17s one especially, and he was running things despite the fact he was only 15. He and Jamie Donnelly got such a terrific partnership at times as well. But yeah, we'll see. It's one of those where I've been here so many times before. So many young players that we see kind of have got such a talent, but then it's just what happens in that step. The step before reaching the first team is the biggest step. They can train with the first team. Mikey Moore's trained with the first team, despite the fact he's only 15. But it's such a big step to still make that leap into being a consistent first team player, or even just get your debut, to be honest, is a big old step itself. So we'll see what happens with Mikey. But yeah, very exciting. Niall John and Matthew Craig have still got to decide. They've got offers from the club. They've got to decide what their future holds, whether they're going to stick around or not, or whether they are going to head off and try their luck elsewhere, as Romain Mundle was doing. I'm intrigued to see where Romain ends up. I know there were definitely options from around Europe, clubs looking at him, and I know Niall certainly has had some, and Matthew Craig will definitely have options. He's been like a real standout player for the under-21s this year. Very talented Scotland youth international as well. Can play in midfield or defence. Very good player. So yeah, let's see what happens with him. What else have we got to tidy up before I go? Sonny's, if you weren't aware, has revealed that for the last 6 to 9 months he had a sports hernia injury, which is only just, he had surgery at the end of the season after the Leeds match. He's been out for about 2 to 3 weeks. Couldn't play in South Korea's first game. It was an unused sub. Klinsmann said he's likely to definitely won't start their second game against El Salvador tomorrow, but he is likely to come on at some point. So you're looking at 3 to 4 weeks of being out. It's a difficult one because my first thought when I heard that was, and he's look at the quotes. He said he genuinely, his movement was impacted, his ability to turn at times, and I think he said down to 60% at times, which would explain some of his struggles this season as well as the system he was in. But my first thought was, well, why didn't you get that done during the season? It's a difficult one because Sonny just wants to play, and that is his mentality. He doesn't want to let anyone down. He's such a wonderful character that he just doesn't want to. It's one of those where almost like the club would have to say to him, no, it needs to be done. You need to be sorted. We need to see the best Sonny. But he's such a humble, giving guy that he kind of just puts his body on the line constantly. And you do wonder, because obviously he had the World Cup as well. He said 6 to 9 months it's been going on as well. So obviously he had the World Cup where he didn't want to let his country down. He didn't want to let Spurs down. But hopefully, if he can get a decent bit of recovery time from this, comes back, again, I do think he's going to flourish. There's so many players I'm quite excited to see how they work in Postecoglou's system, and Sonny is one of them. So yeah, we shall see what happens with Sonny, and hopefully he comes back way, very fit and fresh and ready for the new season. Talking of the new season, since the last video, we've had the fixtures come out. Interesting ones. I know there's the old cliche, you've got to play them all twice. Yes, I know this, but that doesn't also take away from the fact that sometimes you can have a cluster of matches that are a bit of a nightmare. And for Spurs, that has happened in April, where they have, April into May, they play Newcastle away, Man City at home, Arsenal at home, Liverpool away, all in a row. That could change. There could be other games in between there. But still, that is a bit of a nightmare. And there's not too many periods where you look at it and think, oh, that's a really kind of easy on paper period. They do have that thing again, which I've seen people be a little bit annoyed at, is the fact that they start the season away from home at Brentford, end the season away from home at Sheffield United, and they're even away on Boxing Day at Brighton. We've all got that trip down south for Boxing Day. And whereas you look at someone like Arsenal, all 3 of those games at home. You look at Chelsea, all 3 of those games at home. To start and end the season at home, it does give you an advantage. Of course it does. But look, hey, it's the randomly generated machine, apparently. The fixtures computer. Personally, the other one I'm obviously keeping an eye on is we've got, first home game, biggie, Man United on the 19th of August. Currently 19th of August against... for Postecoglou's first home game, which is a huge one. First North London derby away, 23rd of September. Currently, again, that could change. This is the thing. Other than the first and last games, all the times and dates can change because of football TV picks. But yeah, 4th of November for me. That's one I'm keeping an eye on big time. Chelsea come to Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. We shall see. Mauricio Pochettino, presuming nothing's happened by then, in the away dugout. Oh, that's going to be horrendous. I would have thought he'll get a really good reception still. I think overwhelmingly it will still be a positive reception for him. But yeah, so those fixtures. It's lovely to see how the season's going to play out and how and where I've got to go. No European trips this year, but certainly lots of far-flung domestic trips, especially with the promoted teams that have come up as well. So yeah, I'll be honest. I always need like a week or two after the season when I'm just like, I hate football. What have I done with? I'm knackered. And after that first couple of weeks, I'm back into I'm really excited about next season. And I'm there, I think, especially the Postecoglou factor, I think is going to be really exciting. It could either be amazing or disastrous. I was reading another bit from his book, which I actually haven't got to yet. Someone, I've forgotten their name. I've tagged them in the article I did on it. It was about Postecoglou explaining his the moment he knew at Brisbane Roar, one of his former clubs, when he was when his system and all his philosophy, the players had bought into it, and it was a defeat. They got beaten 3-0 by Melbourne Victory, the big team in the A League. But he could see one of his younger central defenders play out from the back, made a mistake. Oh, sorry, it got cut out. Tried again. It got cut out and they let in a goal. But rather than be really angry that they conceded twice from the same mistake, he was so excited that his young defender had done exactly what he wanted it to do and shown the bravery, had tried to play the system. And in that moment, he's like, I've got him. I've got him. They're doing what I want. And they did not lose another game from that point on for the next 36 matches, which was a record in Australia. And yeah, Raw Salona, as they were called, they played some incredible football. So I'm intrigued to see the moment that happens at Spurs. There's going to be some, tricky moments where they have to adjust. There's going to be some rocky results to begin with as they kind of try and get the idea of his football. But ultimately, it could be some really great football. There could be some really dodgy results, but there could be some great football. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to finally sitting down with Postecoglou and get my own stuff from him and my own kind of insights into the way he operates and his beliefs. And hopefully we'll get that in Australia, back in his homeland, and it will be a really nice way to kick things off, and hopefully with some new signings out there as well. Literally, as I am finishing up this video, Harry Kane is about to take a penalty, which is just happening in my eye line, which is why I thought, I'll just keep it going for another 30 seconds or so that you can take the penalty. Don't miss it, Harry, because I've kept this video going just to be able to say, and Harry Kane scores. This is one of these where you'll be looking back later and going, oh my goodness, he saw him miss to make it, would have made it 7-0. Please score, Harry. Go on, Harry. Put this in the net. Another just phenomenal player. Please score. Otherwise, that makes that sound really ridiculous. What a weird way to end this for all of you who know exactly how this ends. And here he goes. And he's smashed it straight into the corner because he's Harry Kane. That's what he does. So there you go. Right, I'm going to head off. I didn't need. There's no benefit to you whatsoever. I just wanted to see him score. Because it's Harry Kane, he's absolutely class. So here you go. Hopefully lots in that, lots of stuff. We know the shape of how the transfer window is going to hopefully look. We know what Spurs have got to do in terms of incomings and outgoings. The names will obviously change and there'll be new ones come up and new opportunities always arise in the market. But ultimately, that's your kind of set plan, which is a goalkeeper, 2 centre-backs, a central attacking midfielder who can play in a couple of different systems, and a preferably young winger. Doesn't mean it'll end up being a young winger, but that's the idea. So yeah, we shall see who the names are that fill those spots and whether anything else exciting comes up. Hopefully it does. So there you go. Right, I'm going to head off because that's ended up being a way longer ending than I wanted. And it's all Harry Kane's fault. How dare he? Right, head off now. Enjoy the rest of my evening, as you all should. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves. I shall catch you later. Goodbye.